I thought helping her carry books was just a kind gesture until she whispered, "You've always been a chapter one reread." I never thought a stack of old books could change the trajectory of a day, let alone a life. But there she was, bending under the weight of volumes so thick they looked like they could break her wrists. The late afternoon sun slanted through the bookstore window, dust motes dancing in streaks of gold, and for a moment I froze. Something about the way she exhaled, almost apologetically, felt like it had a rhythm I recognized but couldn't place. "Let me help you with those," I said before thinking too much. My voice sounded louder than I expected, cutting through the quiet hum of the shop. She looked up, and I swear the world shifted a little. Her hair had silver streaks I hadn't noticed at first, the kind that caught light in a soft, almost knowing way. Lines around her eyes hinted at laughter, maybe sorrow, or both. I couldn't tell. She smiled, just slightly, but it held something like relief. "You're very kind," she said, tilting her head. There was a pause, a hesitation, and then, "You've always been a chapter one reread." I stopped, mid-step, clutching the corner of a worn hardcover. The words hit like a heartbeat I wasn't ready for. My throat went dry. I wanted to laugh, to ask what she meant, but even as I opened my mouth, I felt small under her gaze, like all the years between us had been whispered through those four words. Her apartment smelled faintly of old paper and vanilla. I hadn't expected it, the quiet warmth of it, the way the sunlight pooled in patches on the floorboards. She set the stack of books down on the couch, careful not to crease the spines, and I noticed the tremor in her hands. Not weakness exactly, just hesitation. The kind that comes from carrying more than anyone should, the kind you don't talk about. We moved slowly around each other, arranging books, avoiding too much eye contact but stealing glances anyway. I could feel the tension coil like a living thing between us. Every brush of her hand against mine, every time her knees nearly touched as we reached for the same volume, sent a pulse through me I wasn't expecting. "I didn't know you were still in the city," she said, finally, her voice quieter now. Vulnerable, like she wasn't used to admitting that she'd noticed me, that she'd remembered me. "I never really left," I replied, and immediately wished I'd said more. Something about her presence demanded honesty, even if it scared me. There was a history here, between us, around us, that neither of us was naming, and that silence burned hotter than any words could. We sat on the couch, knees almost touching, reading lines from the same books, occasionally laughing softly at passages we remembered differently. Her eyes caught mine more often than seemed accidental, and each time I felt a tug, not just attraction, but familiarity. Like we'd skipped the small talk, the cautious dance, and landed somewhere uncharted. A sudden sound made both of us start, the shrill chime of her doorbell. She hesitated, glancing toward the entrance. My chest tightened. Who could it be? She froze for a moment, hand hovering over the intercom. I wanted to tell her it was fine, to stay here in this suspended, improbable quiet with her, but the tension lingered, thick in the sunlight. She pressed the button, and as her lips parted to answer, I realized I wasn't ready for anyone else in this moment. Not a visitor, not a memory, not even the city outside. Just her, sitting there with that faint, unspoken confession in her eyes. And then she looked at me, really looked, as if she'd been holding a secret she didn't quite know how to say. The door clicked, and my heart lurched. The doorbell had rung again, sharp and insistent, but she didn't move right away. She lingered, a hand on the intercom, her other brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I wanted to say something, anything, to break the quiet, but my voice had gone soft, almost useless. I felt like I was trespassing into a world that wasn't mine, even though I'd been invited. "You don't have to answer it," I finally said, my words hesitant. Too hesitant, probably. She looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment I saw a flicker of something I hadn't expected, a fragile hesitation, the weight of a life she'd carried alone. She began, then stopped. Instead of finishing, she let out a short, tired laugh. "It's nothing. Just old habits. People showing up when you're not ready." I nodded, but the words didn't settle. I remembered her stories from years ago, bits and pieces she'd share before I left town. A marriage that ended quietly, without fireworks, leaving her with memories that weren't painful but heavy, like books stacked on a shelf that you can't quite reach. And me, I've been drifting through early 20s mistakes, fleeting romances, none of them meaningful. Yet now I found myself hyper-aware of this older woman, of the way her fingers trembled slightly when she reached for a book, or the way her gaze lingered on me longer than was reasonable. "Do you ever regret things?" she asked suddenly, her voice low, almost a whisper. I froze. She wasn't looking at the books anymore. She was looking at me. All the time, I admitted. The words were easier than I expected, though part of me flinched to how honest I was being. Some mistakes, you carry them like someone else's shadow. You don't even realize it until it moves in front of you again. She smiled softly, eyes reflecting something like recognition. "Funny," she said. "I thought I was the only one with shadows like that." It hit me then how dangerous this was, how wrong, in some ways, it could feel. I was barely out of college. She had decades of life and heartbreak etched into her face. She could have chosen anyone, any man, but here I was, an awkward kid with hands that shook as he held her books. And yet, there was a gravity between us I couldn't deny, pulling me closer even as I wanted to step back. We drifted into silence, not the uncomfortable kind, but a charged, unspoken kind. I noticed the way her leg brushed mine under the couch, accidental or not. I caught her gaze flickering to mine, holding it just long enough to make my chest tighten. "You always know what to say," she murmured after a pause, and I wanted to tell her I didn't. That most of the time, I fumbled through life, pretending I had answers I didn't. Instead, I reached over, my hand barely grazing hers as I set a book down. She didn't pull away. Her fingers twitched against mine, almost imperceptibly but enough. Enough to make me realize that some connections aren't logical, aren't safe, and aren't supposed to make sense. And yet, they're irresistible. And for the first time that afternoon, I felt like I belonged somewhere I hadn't even realized I'd been searching for. The soft brush of her fingers against mine lingered longer than it should have, and I felt the heat rise in my chest. I wanted to pull back, to tell myself this was reckless, impossible, forbidden even. But every time I glanced at her, the logic dissolved. Her eyes held something I couldn't name, something dangerous and magnetic. A knock at the door startled both of us. My heart lurched. She stiffened, hand frozen midair, and I realized how fragile this moment had been. "It's just the delivery guy," she said quickly, her voice too sharp. She moved to the door, but I caught her hand for a brief second. "Wait." Her fingers twitched against mine, and then she let go, just as the door opened. A tall man, familiar, smiled at her. My stomach sank. "Hey, Claire," he said casually. "I brought those files you asked for." Claire. That name was hers, Claire. Not that it mattered. I'd known it all along. But hearing it with someone else present made her suddenly more hers. Her posture changed. She looked smaller, cautious, almost apologetic. "Thanks, David," she said. Her tone softened, but her eyes flickered toward me, and I felt the sharp sting of exclusion. I tried to step back, to give her space, but my body refused to obey. I stayed close enough to feel the tension radiating between us, a silent current that neither of us could name. As David left, the door clicking behind him, Claire exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. I wanted to say something, anything to bridge the sudden distance. But my voice failed, caught in the sudden, overwhelming awareness of how risky this all was. "Sorry about that," she murmured, turning to me. Her fingers brushed mine again, almost accidentally. I didn't move away. "I shouldn't be here," I said finally, my own voice rough. "I mean this, whatever this is," I trailed off, knowing she'd understand. She always did. Claire's eyes dropped to the floor. She chewed her lower lip, a little trembling. "I know," she whispered. And then, almost inaudibly, "But it's not just about you leaving or staying." I stepped closer, despite the guilt gnawing at my ribs. "Then what is it about?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for a book, fingers brushing mine once more. That simple, careless contact was electric. I could feel the history between us, the familiarity, the desire simmering just beneath restraint. And yet, it was all dangerous. A sudden thought hit me. What if someone saw? What if her life, so carefully constructed after years of loss, collided with mine in a way that ruined everything? I wanted to step back, to run, but I couldn't. Every glance, every touch, pulled me in deeper. Her eyes met mine, wide and unguarded, and I realized something terrifying and beautiful. We were both standing on the edge of something we couldn't name, something that would change us if we let it. I wanted to ask her if we should stop, but the moment we almost reached for each other, just the ghost of a touch hovering in the space between us, neither of us spoke. And maybe, for the first time, neither of us wanted to. I couldn't stop thinking about the way her fingers lingered on mine after David left. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. That fleeting contact, small but incendiary. I told myself it was nothing, that I was imagining things. But then she looked at me that evening across the living room, and all pretense evaporated. "I shouldn't be like this," Claire said suddenly, her voice trembling just enough to betray her calm. She was holding a book, twisting it nervously in her hands. You're young. You have your life ahead of you. Her eyes darted away, and I caught a glint of something I hadn't seen before, guilt. Deep, clawing guilt. "You don't get to decide that for me," I said before thinking. My words came out sharper than intended, and she flinched, but she didn't leave. She never left. She finally met my eyes, and I saw everything in them. The longing she tried to hide, the fear of being reckless, and maybe, just maybe, the hope that I felt the same. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared that this, whatever this is between us, could ruin everything. That I could ruin everything." Her words hit me like a weight I couldn't lift. She was beautiful, yes, but more than that. She was complicated, layered, a life full of memories and mistakes and victories I had no right to touch. And still, I couldn't stay away. A sudden noise from the street made her startle, and she looked at the window nervously. I noticed the subtle tension in her shoulders, the way she hugged herself instinctively. That small motion broke something inside me. I wanted to reassure her, to tell her she wasn't alone, but the words lodged in my throat. Instead, I stepped closer, careful not to crowd her, but close enough that the space between us crackled. "Claire," I said softly, "you don't have to be scared. Not with me." Her lips parted slightly, a flicker of hope, but she looked away immediately. I caught a flash of her vulnerability, that hidden wound she tried to hide behind grace and humor. She was a storm in human form, brilliant, overwhelming, and just out of reach. I wanted to reach for her, to bridge the impossible gap, but my own doubts screamed. What if this was wrong? What if I was being selfish? Yet the magnetic pull between us was undeniable, tugging me closer, even as reason demanded distance. She swallowed hard, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face, and I could see her trembling, subtle but undeniable. Her eyes flickered back to mine, questioning, daring, unspoken. The tension was suffocating. I lifted a hand, almost unconsciously, hovering near her cheek. The world outside disappeared. The hum of the city, the weight of our pasts, the unspoken rules, it all vanished in that moment suspended between hesitation and surrender. "Do you feel it too?" I whispered, barely audible, though my chest ached with the intensity of the question. Her breath hitched, and for a heartbeat, we were poised on the edge of everything: desire, fear, inevitability. And then the sound of a text alert on her phone broke the silence. She glanced down, eyes widening in alarm, and I realized neither of us could ignore it. The moment hung between us, electric and trembling, and I had no idea if it would end in confession, chaos, or heartbreak. The alert on her phone had been a simple message, but the way her face changed made my chest tighten. Her hand shook slightly as she read it, and I saw it before she could speak. Something had shifted. It's from David," she whispered, voice tight. My stomach sank. "He knows I've been seeing you." I froze. My mind raced. How could he know? We had been careful. Careful with our touches, careful with our words, careful with the silences between us. And now, in an instant, all of that precaution felt meaningless. She dropped the phone onto the coffee table, eyes wide, lips parted. He saw us. Not here, but at the bookstore. Someone told him I don't know. Her voice broke, the carefully constructed composure crumbling. I had never seen her like this, vulnerable, panicked, utterly human. I reached for her hand, but she flinched, pulling back. The warmth between us evaporated, replaced by tension thick enough to choke on. Claire, I began, but she held up a hand. No, let me finish, she said. Her voice was low, urgent. He's not just going to ask questions. He'll confront me. Confront us. I thought I could keep this harmless, temporary. But now, her gaze pierced mine, filled with panic, fear, and something raw, almost pleading. I could see her history laid bare in that moment. The years of carefully managing expectations, of guarding her heart after the quiet heartbreaks, the safe routines she built to avoid chaos. And suddenly, that fragile structure was cracking. Because of me. Because of us. I can leave, I said before I could stop myself. If it's safer for you. She shook her head violently. No. Her hands gripped mine, so hard it hurt. Don't say that. Don't even think it. I want this. I want you. Even if it's terrifying. Even if it's reckless. Even if it destroys everything. Her words hit me like fire. I wanted to hold her, to tell her everything I'd been holding back. How long I'd thought about her. How every look, every touch had stayed in my mind, replaying, unrelenting. But now, her fear, the looming threat of David, made it almost impossible to breathe. We sat there, hands intertwined, the tension between desire and consequence tangling us in knots. Her chest heaved, my jaw tightened, and I could feel her heartbeat, rapid, uneven, through the slight brush of our palms. I don't care if it's wrong, she whispered finally, leaning a fraction closer. I don't care if it's dangerous. I just need to know that this isn't just me. And in that instant, the world outside didn't matter. The threat of confrontation, the rules we were breaking, the age gap, the past mistakes, none of it mattered. All that existed was the gravity between us, a pull neither of us could resist. I leaned closer, almost against my better judgment, and felt her breath mingle with mine. The room seemed smaller, the shadows deeper, and every heartbeat louder. Then, without warning, her phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, eyes widening. I froze. Whatever it was, I knew it would change everything. Claire's phone buzzed again, the screen glowing like a warning I couldn't ignore. But I didn't reach for it. I couldn't. My gaze was locked on hers, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not David, not the city outside, not the years of shoulds and could-have-beens. I can't keep hiding, she said, voice trembling but steady. Her hands gripped mine, tighter than ever, knuckles white. I can't pretend this isn't real. I can't pretend I don't feel this for you. I swallowed hard. Every logical part of me screamed to step back, to respect the boundaries, to leave her life intact. But the part of me that had been waiting for this, waiting for her, surged forward, unrestrained. You don't have to pretend, I whispered. I've wanted this, wanted you, since forever. And I don't care about the risks anymore. Her eyes glistened, and I saw every flicker of fear, hope, guilt, and desire collide there. It was messy, beautiful, human, and it terrified me. Not because it was wrong, but because it was so perfectly, irrevocably right. She shook her head slightly, laughing nervously through tears. You don't understand. People are watching. Dave in my life, everything. What if I ruin it? What if I ruin you? You won't, I said firmly. I'm not afraid. Not of you, not of us. Not anymore. Her breath hitched, and then she leaned closer, just a fraction, enough for our foreheads to almost touch. The heat between us was electric, but still cautious, still measured by the years and mistakes that shadowed us. I could feel the tension, the longing, the question, do we dare? I don't know if we can, if this is safe, she admitted, voice barely audible. But I know I don't want to let go. And in that moment, I realized that neither of us could walk away without losing something we had been searching for all our lives. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't simple. But it was ours. We stayed like that, close but not fully, hands intertwined, breaths mingling, letting the silence speak what our words couldn't. It was a fragile equilibrium, full of risk, full of promise, full of truth. Then, a shadow of a smile crossed her lips. So what now? I laughed softly, almost bitterly, because the answer was impossible, messy, terrifying, but also exhilarating. Now we figured out. Together. Somehow. Her eyes softened, a mixture of relief and fear and something dangerously hopeful. She pressed her hand to mine again, firm, grounding, claiming. And for the first time in years, I felt something that wasn't fleeting, something that felt like home. The phone buzzed again, its glow cutting through the dim light, a reminder that the world outside hadn't paused for us. But we didn't move. Not yet. I rested my forehead lightly against hers, just close enough to feel the warmth, the pulse, the life we'd almost denied ourselves. And in that quiet, trembling moment, everything else could wait. The days that followed weren't perfect. Life didn't pause for us, and the city kept moving, oblivious to the quiet storm between Claire and me. There were awkward glances, whispered phone calls, and moments when the weight of what we were doing pressed down hard. But there was also laughter, small victories, and the kind of intimacy that sneaks in unnoticed, a hand brushing against mine in a bookstore aisle, shared coffee cups, the comfortable silence of someone who finally knows you. Claire and I learned to navigate the edges of our worlds. We didn't fix everything. Old responsibilities, people from the past, and lingering fears still lingered, but we found a rhythm. One evening, as we walked through the park, leaves crunching beneath our feet, she stopped and looked at me, her face soft in the golden light. You know, she said, I never thought I'd feel this alive again. Not like this. Not with anyone. I smiled, feeling the warmth spread my chest. Neither did I. But here we are. Her hand found mine, fingers interlacing, familiar and new at the same time. And in that simple gesture, I felt everything we had risked, everything we had fought for, and everything we were still discovering. We didn't need grand gestures, no declarations on mountaintops, no sweeping confessions in crowded rooms. Our moments were quiet, small, but they mattered. A shared glance across a cafe, a note slipped into a book, a laugh that lingered longer than it should have. Each one a thread weaving us together, stronger than fear or doubt. And sometimes, late at night, we'd sit together among the piles of books in her apartment, reading aloud to each other, the words falling around us like music. I'd watch her smile, the soft light catching her silver-streaked hair, and remember the first time I helped her carry those books. It seemed impossible then that a simple act could lead here to this fragile, luminous place. I realized that life doesn't give neat endings, but it does give chances, quiet, surprising, and sometimes terrifying chances, to be seen, to be understood, and to choose love even when it's complicated. And we had chosen it together. So, here we are, imperfect, alive, and tethered by something neither of us expected but both of us needed. There's still questions, still unknowns, still risks, but now the risk feels worth it. Because when you finally find someone who feels like home, you don't let them go. And as I sit here, hand in hers, I can't help but wonder what comes next. The story isn't over, but the hardest part, admitting, reaching, daring, is done. Did you enjoy this story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next? Slow burn romance, forbidden love, or emotional journeys like Claire and mine? If you like this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt, human stories that make your heart skip a beat.